What's going on, everyone? Sorry I was not here last week, and too bad I wasn't, because we probably had one of our best weeks in months. I mean, we literally slaughtered this card from top to bottom. We also slaughtered boxing. We're going to go over a quick review on that, then we're going to jump into this card. So with the boxing end of it, obviously we had a huge fight, Bivol and Beterbiev. It was one of the closest to even fights, big fights, that we've had in a long time. It was like minus 110, plus 110, or whatever, on either side, depending on which book you looked. And a lot of people were looking at this as it was the boxer versus a puncher, right? It was a technical, striker versus a guy who comes in with hellacious power, and Beterbiev, who is 20-0 with 20 KOs. And I did a 45-minute pod on my site, which is this is why people join. Like, we break things down a little bit more in detail with more finite, nooks and crannies than just, this is a boxer versus a puncher. This is what's going to happen. So everybody obviously was taking one or two things. They were taking Bivol by decision because he's not a power puncher, but a very good technical striker. Or they were taking Beterbiev by knockout because he is the knockout artist, and we have seen Bivol at least put on skates a little bit. So that's where the consensus went, okay? And a lot of people were actually on Bivol, to win the fight. So what we did was we angled it a little different way. We took Beterbiev straight up, plus 110, which hit because he ended up winning a decision. But I was also explaining in the pod how, people are really discounting what a good boxer Beterbiev actually is. You get so absorbed by his power and how hard he hits with his right, especially his right hand, but his left hand too, that it kind of gets lost in translation. What a really good technical boxer he actually is to be able to set up these shots, to be able to walk you down, create these angles and set up these shots. So I said that it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility that this goes to the decision and he wins the decision. And a lot of people thought I was nuts for saying it, but it was a plus 700, and we ended up hitting that. So we hit two bets in boxing this weekend, plus 700, Beterbiev by decision and Beterbiev straight up, both of them big plus money. Well, one of them big plus money, the other one was plus money. Then in the UFC, we had a monster weekend. I mean, you could not ask for a better weekend. The only blip in the radar that we had, the one fight that we did lose, was Jonathan Pierce. I did pick him to win the fight. Don't know what happened there. I don't know. He got out-grappled. I was honestly pretty confident that he would win that fight. So, but our wagers did amazing. We hit a parlay with Park and Dawson. We hit a parlay with Garimbo and D-Rod. We hit Chitty and over 1.5 plus 125. Then we hit our suicide parlay, which was a plus 720. So we had a monster weekend. I think we only got one fight on the card wrong. We also picked Brandon Royval over Tara, who looked fantastic. And I said in the pod, I said in my write-up, as much as I think Tara's going to be a champion one day, he's got that capability. He's still very young. He's never faced a guy like Royval. When you get a guy like Royval who's only lost to current and past champions, who's proven 5 rounds, who's proven in those big spots, you can't just discount this guy and be like he's going to lose. So I didn't see a situation where I could say, I can actually pick this guy over Royval. So we've been actually slaughtering the main events. I mean, slaughtering the main events. We had all 4 title fights correct. 3 of them were and news. Obviously, this fight was another one that everybody, heavy consensus on Taria. The boxing with a lot of people were on Bivol, so we've been actually slaughtering all main events. So we're going to be looking to carry over, obviously, to this week with a little bit of a tougher card, but still a lot of room for value and I got a lot to say about some of these fights. So the main event is actually a good one, and it's one that I'm not really super. If you would have asked me this about 3 years ago, if I would have saw these guys in this position, I'd probably say no. And both of them for different reasons, right? Anthony Hernandez, I just was never really super high on, and that's just all there is to it. When he fought Rodolfo Vieira, I thought it was kind of fluky, just for the mere fact that Rodolfo Vieira has no gas tank. And if you stretch him past a certain round, you can take advantage of him. And it doesn't matter what belt you are. When you're gassed out like that, you tend to just throw in a towel. So that was kind of the product I was looking at with Anthony Hernandez. He was a product of a really good situation. But he's proved me wrong as time went on. The kid is super, super tough. He's durable. He's got a good gas tank. He's got a nonstop pressure game that really will drown you in the end if you're not prepared for it. So, he's in this spot, and I never really expected him to be there. On the Michel Pereira side, it's a little bit different. I see all the tools from him. I saw all the tools from him, and I said, this guy really does have the ability to be a really, really good ranked and a good fighter. The problem I felt that would hold him back was his ability to just showboat way too much. Almost like a Kevin Holland. This is a guy who has done things in the cage that you don't need to do. Like, instead of just winning the fight, you don't need to backflip on somebody or do something crazy like that. And I just saw this is a guy who's a little bit too narcissistic in the cage, and it's going to be the death of him. And it came back to bite him in the ass when he fought Tristan Connolly. This guy was just like a journeyman fighter. Michel Pereira was the biggest favorite on the card. And Tristan Connolly took it to him. He took this kid way, way too lightly. It was the best thing that happened to Michel Pereira, because what happened after that point, he hasn't lost a fight since, and he has fought very, very well since. He's been knocking guys out. He's looked a lot better. He's now moved to 185, which I really do believe this is the weight division for him. But the thing with him that makes him so hard to gauge is that when you get a guy like him that's so athletic, so dynamic, he needs to showboat in his fights. You can't take that completely away from him. But as a trainer and as a camp, how do you find that center line where you're taking away some of his dynamic ability, where you're taking away some of his showboating to make him a little bit more serious, but not taking it all away where it's actually going to be a detriment to his game? That's a very hard center line to find, and his team and him has kind of found that. They found it in a new weight division. They found it in the new way of training, the new mindset, and it's really, really, really paid dividends for him. So here they are now. These guys are both in a great spot, and the winner of this fight is going to be obviously in a much better spot. But this is the tale of two fights, in my opinion. This is honestly the tale of two completely different fights. This has the opportunity to have two fights in one. And what I mean by that is Michel Pereira is a very, very fast starter. This guy comes out of the gates quick. He looks to put it on you. If he sees that you're on skates, he's going to go for the finish, and you've seen the pattern. Anthony Hernandez, on the other hand, is a guy who's a slower starter. This is a guy who takes a while to warm up a little bit, okay? But once he starts warming up, once he starts chain wrestling, once he starts getting his grappling going, it's just nonstop. And now you're at the point where you were beating him for the first round or two, and now you're on the defensive because he's constantly on your hips. And then it's up to you to have the conditioning, have the gas tank, understand how to get away, and still open up offense. So, this is a fight where I'm looking at it. It's Michel Pereira early or Anthony Hernandez late. So from a wagering perspective, I would probably stay away from this one. I would say this is a much more of a live betting opportunity on the Anthony Hernandez side. The reason why I'm saying the Anthony Hernandez side is because you really can't do a live bet on Pereira or if you're expecting him to win early. This is a guy who can knock him out in the first round, can knock him out in the second round. This is a fight where you kind of got to wait for the middle of the third round to see, where is this heading? Is the momentum changing? Is Anthony Hernandez now starting to get in on his hips? And can Michel Pereira last the fourth and fifth round? Is he going to have the gas tank to keep up with Hernandez at that point? So that's the tale of two fights there. And it's really picking which side you really believe it's going to land on, which side of the coin. For me, I'm still going with Michel Pereira here. I just think that, I've seen Anthony Hernandez stunned. I've seen him hurt. I've seen what a slow starter he is. And Michel Pereira has just this dynamic ability to find you early. And if he finds Anthony Hernandez early, he is not going to let him off the hook. He's not the type of guy that if you go onto your skate, if you're on your bike and you look like you're getting ready to go on Queer Street, he's not going to let up. The concern I do have with him, though, is he does something stupid. He knocks Hernandez down. He goes for a backflip to land on top of him. It's something you don't want to do with somebody like Hernandez. But he does have a very wide window for the first round or two to get Hernandez out of there, or at least put a really good beating on him to really slow him down. If he does not do that, and this goes into the third round, then you might want to start hedging your side on the Hernandez side, because that's when this kid starts heating up. And I'm not completely 100% sold. As good as Pereira looks at 185, I'm still not sold that he's got this motor in the fourth and fifth round, where I know Anthony Hernandez has a nonstop motor. So it's a very interesting fight. It's a coin flip fight. And I think you're going to see two different fights within one, depending on how long it stretches out. But I'm not expecting it to go to the second leg of the fight. I'm expecting Pereira to kind of get him out of there. I'm going to say maybe second round, or maybe just really put it on him in the second round, to the point where maybe Anthony Hernandez can't get his groove going after that, because he's fighting a little bit too defensively. So I'm going to go Pereira by knockout. But like I said, it's a fight that I'm staying away from. I mean, the line is very close. I don't see value really on either side. But if Pereira starts putting it on him for the first 2 rounds, and then all of a sudden you have a live betting opportunity where Hernandez has plus money, might be worth a shot. So you could take it for that. Next one, you got Kyler Phillips and Rob Font. You guys know that from my pedigree, my background, it's all boxing for me, and I tend to lean with the technical strikers. But you also have to look at the matchup. And Rob Font is a very good technical striker, works behind a really good jab, very, very sharp. Excuse me. Very sharp. The thing with him is he's very north and south. This is a guy who literally comes in with that traditional style boxing. He's looking to, throw his jab out there. He's very in and out, in and out. He doesn't go crazy lateral movement. So if you have the right blueprint, especially with him being a little deficient in his takedown defense and his wrestling, under 50% with his takedown defense, you can have not your way with him, but you can steal some rounds. Kyler Phillips is a guy who does not fight north and south. This guy is very dynamic. He's like a Anthony Pettis 2.0 when he was younger. Moves around a lot, moves linear, moves north and south, moves lateral. He's kind of all over the place. So somebody who is not stationary boxer, but a traditional style boxer, it's hard for you to track a guy like that down. It's hard for you to lay a beat on that guy. So I find a situation where Rob Font's going to be searching for him way too much. And if you take the frustration that sets in, you take that Rob Font's going to be pushing forward on him, and the angles that Phillips is going to create to possibly get a takedown and secure a takedown and start grappling him from there. It's just tough sledding for me, to pick on Rob Font. There's very minimal windows that I see a good argument to say, yeah, Rob Font's going to win this fight. Yeah, if they stand up for 15 minutes and they're head-to-head and toe-to-toe, Rob Font's live against anybody. But Kyler Phillips doesn't fight like that. Kyler Phillips is kind of all over the place. He's unchained. He's dynamic. He's mixing in takedowns. And I think it's just going to give Rob Font issues. I really, really do. He's the much younger fighter. Rob Font is a little bit aged and shop-worn at this point. Still has good speed, still has good accuracy, but I think Kyler Phillips is going to be a little bit ahead of him in this fight. So I'm going to go Kyler Phillips here. I think he's a pretty safe play. I think people might get a little sucked into Rob Font on DraftKings and stuff like that too as well, just because of the name value. And if you look at his resume, you've seen the people that he fought and compare it to Kyler Phillips. But sometimes you can't get sucked into that. Next fight, we got Charles Johnson versus Sue Majority. This is a good fight. Like, I got to be honest with you. I don't look at the odds of these fights until I'm done breaking them down. And honestly, I expected Charles Johnson to be a very slight favorite in this fight. I was saying, minus 120, I think would be a good number for him. And when I saw it was like 2-1 odds, I was like, that's a little overblown. Now, we're going to take the business perspective out of this for a minute, and we're just going to jump into the matchup. There is a clear path to beat, I call him Mud. To beat Mud, right? And it's honestly, if Tim Elliott kind of exposed that. You know what I mean? Like you can take advantage of this guy with the grappling, but when it comes to striking, this guy's very, very slick. Like he has a very low guard. He used a good sniper jab. He's accurate. He picks his shots very well. He doesn't waste a lot of motion. And when you look at Charles Johnson, like the clear path for him, for my money, is if I said, listen, you got to come in just a majorly heavy grappling game here. Just push the grappling on him. Take him down, try to make him grapple with you. There's no reason to stand with this guy for 15 minutes. And that's all fine and good. And Charles Johnson does have the ability to do that. But if you look at his overall body of work, in 9 fights, he's only got 3 takedowns. So he's not a super active grappler. This is a guy who you can bait into a firefight. And when you're baiting into a firefight with a guy like, Mud, it could be tricky. Like I said, this is a guy who really fights with an odd style. He fights with a low guard. He throws that jab out there, keeps you at range, keeps you honest. Charles Johnson could find himself in a points battle here. You know what I mean? In a fight where both of these guys are getting off, and it's very slim pickings at the end of whichever round it is. So, is there a path for Charles Johnson to win this fight? 1,000%. The path is going to be for him just grappling heavy. But you got to also look at the historical speaking end of this, where he's only got 3 takedowns in 9 fights. Like, how active is he really going to be? Is he going to come in and completely switch his game plan up for this guy? Or is he going to utilize it maybe if he needs it or if he's in trouble? And is Mud going to be able to keep him into a little bit of a exchange for 15 minutes? So I'm going to go with the dog here. I'm going to go with history and say Charles Johnson's probably going to try to keep this on the feet, and I think that's going to keep Mud live. And there's another reason for this too. It's also the business end of it. When you look at Charles Johnson, this is a guy who he's good. He's fun to watch. He's super fun to watch. But they're not running to the chalkboard trying to make him this contender. The UFC is not going, we need Charles Johnson as a contender. This is a guy who they like him on the roster. We like him on the roster. He's fun to fight, but this isn't the guy you're clamoring for a title shot. You're not really clamoring for Mud either, but the thing is that who brings more business, who generates more money, and it's definitely Mud coming from the Asian market. So this is a guy with 2 losses right now. He gets one more loss that the UFC has to kind of consider. Well, listen, he's on a 3-fight losing streak. His back's kind of against the wall. So there's a part of me that feels like they're not going to be mad if Mud wins this fight, because he is a decent fighter. He's not a bad fighter. He is a good fighter. He's got on a 2-fight losing streak right now. And after you hit that, that wicked 3, I call it, it's time where now you got to start making some decisions. Are we going to cut this guy? Are we going to keep this guy? Are we going to give him an easier fight now to keep him on the board? This is a fight where honestly, I think there's, at the end of the day, do they mind if Charles Johnson wins? Absolutely not. But they probably might lean a little bit towards we're hoping that Mud wins this fight, gets his back against the wall, off the wall. It's just better for the bottom line of business. So I'm going to go with the dog here. I'll go Mud. I think there's value there. I think it's more of a coin flip fight than 2-1. All right, before we get to the next one, we are going to bring Mackenzie in for her pick of the week. Last week she didn't have a pick of the week because we didn't have a show. But too bad because we only lost 1 fight last week on the whole card. But she'll get it this week, so we'll do that now.
Do you guys like how I matched the set today? All red. Today we're going to give you guys a big dog of the week. How about a nice plus 220? Francis Ngannou has forever tormented the heavyweight division with his freakish power. After moving away from the UFC and going into boxing, the world thought that he would beat Anthony Joshua. Not only did we tell you guys that he would lose, but we also told you guys that he would get knocked the out. And he did. Now he comes back to the PFL cage to fight Pereira, who is a huge Brazilian coming into his prime with an opportunity to put his name in lights. And when it comes to the big boys, anything can happen. And if you're giving me new blood at plus 220, then it's definitely worth a stab. So give me that dog money on that primed Brazilian.
All right, I'm going to jump around a little bit. I'm going to do 1 or 2 more here. We're going to do Darren Elkins and Pineda. This fight I'm actually really psyched for because this is 2 old dogs. Right, these are 2 guys that only understand the old school way of fighting. Kill or be killed. That's basically what they are. Darren Elkins made a career with just withstanding major punishment and coming back and dragging you into these waters, testing your conditioning. And if you can't get him out of there, he's going to drag you back to hell with him. And the perfect example is that was when he fought Mirsad Bektic. I mean, when's the last time you guys saw 2 10-8 rounds in a row? Think about that. You had Bektic with a 10-8 round in round 1. You had Bektic with a 10-8 round in round 2. It was total domination to the point where we were like, dude, stop this fight. This fight shouldn't even be going on right now. 3rd round comes along, and Bektic is putting on him a little bit again. But all of a sudden, you're like, wait a minute, hold on a second. This dude is fucking gassed to the gills. Darren Elkins comes back and wins the fight. It was one of the most ridiculous comebacks I've ever seen. This is the type of fighter Darren Elkins is. You need to really just destroy this guy in order to beat him. You either knock him out cold or you need to continuously put it on him, because if you give him a window to start gaining traction and start coming back, this is a guy who will make you pay for it. The issue with Elkins now is that style. How long is that style going to last? The guy is 40. What is he, 40, 41? Let me see. He's 40. He's on his way to being 41. So he's 40 years old. This guy's taking exactly his name. He's taking a ton of fucking damage. How much more damage is this guy going to be able to sustain at that level? Not much more. It's just not a friendly style to his age bracket. Also another thing with Elkins is his scar tissue buildup. This guy's got major scar tissue buildup where if he does at least last and this thing is going to the cards, like this is the guy who's going to open up. He's going to open up quick. He's going to bleed all over the place. And the optics of that alone is not good for the judges. If you see a close fight, you see a clean Daniel Pineda and you see Darren Elkins just cut up and gush, it's just bad optics. I mean, especially if you're judging on damage. So, then you look at a guy like Pineda, who's had his issues too. This is a guy who comes in, he'll put it on you, or you can end up putting it on him. He's had his issues in the past, back and forth, wins and losses. But at the end of the day, when you look at these two guys in a whole, you're looking at a guy in Darren Elkins who is a survivor. He's not a great athlete. He's not a good striker. He's not a coordinated fighter. This is a guy who literally just latches onto you. He'll drag you to the ground and he'll make your life a living hell. Pineda's the type of guy, he's a much better athlete. He's the fresher fighter. He's got sharper hands. He's the better athlete. He's faster, strong. There's just so many things on his side that you can kind of side with here that it's really hard to pick Darren Elkins in this spot. I think Daniel Pineda gets this done. I actually think Daniel Pineda probably finishes him here. I'm going to do one more. I'm going to pick one from the prelims. I'm going to talk about the heavyweight fight because this one is kind of weird to me. Austin Lane and Despain. I don't know about you guys, but I'm not impressed with this guy in any way, shape, or form. I'm not impressed with Despain in any way, shape, or form. I do not think he's a good fighter. I do not think he's going to last. I think he's a freak in nature at 6'7", yeah. But even against Josh Parisian, I wasn't really super impressed with him, even though he won that fight in the first round. It's just there's something about his style. There's something about the way he fights. Like I wasn't overly impressed. Then when he came out and fought Cortez Acosta, we actually picked Cortez Acosta in that fight because I was like, now we're going to see if this guy can. He looked terrible. I mean, he looked terrible in that fight. Costa was talking to him. He was showboating. He looked like it was a cheap sparring partner he was in there with. So now what does the UFC do for this fight? They're in a kind of a pickle here because they did talk this guy up. They said this guy's like this 6'7" monster and, this Taekwondo background and he's some crazy athlete. And so they got to get him back on the board, right? They got to get this guy back on the board. So who do? They go to Old Faithful, I call him. They go to Austin Lane. Austin Lane is Old Faithful. And the reason why I call him Old Faithful is because if you want to put your guy on the board and get him a win, you give him Austin Lane. And it's all there is to it. You give him a guy like Austin Lane. Austin Lane has had no success in the UFC in any way, shape, or form. He won his Contender Series fight. He had a no contest against Justin Tafa. Then he lost to Justin Tafa, and then he lost to Denise. So he has not won a fight in the UFC. So while he's here, the UFC is kind of using him as a bridge. That's all there is to it. This is a guy who played, he was a defensive end, I think, for the Jaguars. Good athlete, but just because you're a good athlete and a good football player doesn't mean you're a good fighter. I mean, not everybody is a Brock Lesnar. Where this guy was, coming from the WWE, but had a great wrestling background. And look what happens when he tried to play football. He went over to the Minnesota Vikings. He couldn't hang. So just because you're coming from one sport to another and you're a good athlete does not mean you're going to translate to the other sport. I would never go play fucking soccer. Imagine me going to play soccer. Imagine me going to play volleyball or something, or even golf. Like, it's just not my thing. Like, if I'm not in a combat setting, like, I'm probably worthless. So this is the way I'm looking at this fight for Despain. They're trying to get him on the board with Austin Lane. With that said, it's still a heavyweight fight. And this is a fight where, honestly, this guy's not good. Like, Despain is not a good fighter. He's not. Austin Lane's not a good fighter. But the fact of the matter is, this is a guy who literally... you got two bums. Like I'm going to call it now. Despain is a bum. I don't care what his credentials are in Taekwondo. I don't care, how slick of an athlete he is. I don't care what you have to say about him, his speed, for his size, and this. I don't care. He's not a good fighter. I don't think he's going to pan out to be shit, if I'm being honest. Austin Lane's not going to pick, but this is a heavyweight fight with two guys who are going to make tons of mistakes. Why can't Austin Lane beat this guy? Why can't he? If you look at the odds on this fight, he's a plus 300, Austin Lane. Despain is a minus 380. In what world should Despain be a minus 380 against anybody? So, you got to kind of lean towards what the business is doing. But I'll tell you right now, I could see a world where Austin Lane beats him. I really, really could. Like, if I had to put money on this fight, if I had to, not that I'm going to, because this is too sloppy of a fight, but if I had to put money on this fight, like, you give me Austin Lane at plus 300, I might take a stab. I might wait until it gets closer to fight time. It might go up to plus 400. You know the way these casuals are; they just jump on the wagon, jump on the wagon, jump on the wagon. This thing can bolster up to plus 400. It went from plus 300. It went down to 285. It went back. It went to 350 at one point, 340, and now it's back to 300. So this thing has the potential to possibly hit a plus 400. You know what I mean? And at plus 400, why not? I mean, why not? Despain has showed us that he's really not that good of a fighter. So smart pick will probably beat Despain, but you ain't getting me to go fucking near him, even in parlays or anything like that. So that's a warning for you guys. That's why I'm kind of talking about this fight, because I want to warn you. I know a lot of you guys like your parlays. A lot of you guys like to go with the general consensus of, oh, this guy's a monster, he's going to be this. This is a fight you stay away from all angles. From all angles. If you want to do an inside the distance prop, either way, fine, like to fight to end inside the distance, but I would not pick a side on this fight. I would not tie the Spain in any of your parlays. So you've been warned. If he wins, he wins. But if you tie him into a parlay and he gets knocked out or he loses this fight, you are going to remember what I'm telling you. Not tie this dude into anything. Overall, I do like the card. I think there's some like I said, there's some aging fighters that we're going to see what they can do. Jessica Pena, obviously, Darren Elkins, Rob Font. It's going to be a good card. I'm actually interested in this card. Now, we also have another card, which is interesting. We have PFL. You got Cyborg fighting Pacheco, which is a really interesting fight. It's a really interesting fight. I have a lot to say about that over at the site. If you want to go check that out, it's the madlabmma.com. We've been slaughtering. I mean, like I said, the last couple weeks in MMA has been spectacular. Last week was one of our best weeks. Also, football, we've been slaying as well. But this is a good card too. So yeah, if you want to jump on, so I'm going to have some picks for PFL too, because I do see some intriguing things. So we're going to have a loaded bet pack this week. We'll have obviously the podcast, we have the projections, we have the fighter metrics, we have football, the roster bully tool that I've been touting like crazy. Had a little bit of a slow start in week 1 and 2 because it kind of had to aggregate and stuff, but it's been slaying the past 3 weeks. 3 weeks it's been doing really, really good. We picked about 2 or 3 slate breakers that hit last week. We had a lot of good sits, a lot of good starts, a lot of caution plays. There's a lot of movement this week. Obviously, you guys know that Amari Cooper is now over at Buffalo, and you have Devontae Adams now moving over to the Jets. So there's going to be a little shuffle there. So yeah, come on down, guys. Check it out. We're probably going to do a really cool giveaway for our subs. Not this card, but for the pay-per-view event with Topuria. I talked to Anthony about it today, so we're gonna do some really good prize giveaways. So, if anything else, you join with us at the madlabmma.com and you have an opportunity to win some stuff too. So you'll get your money's worth with the content, you'll get your money's worth with the DFS, with the bets, and also with the giveaways. And when we do giveaways, we do some pretty cool giveaways. So come check us out, and I will talk to you guys next week.